6:30 CHED Mornings with Daryl McIntyre. Presented by Legacy Heating and Cooling. Building a legacy with no payment, no interest for a year.
Coming up on 6:08. So, the Alberta government is moving forward with what it said it wanted to do, an equalization referendum. Question will be put to voters during the municipal election this fall. So, essentially, the question will ask Albertans if equalization should be removed from the Canadian Constitution. It's certainly not binding. Alberta can't change the Constitution on our own. So, there has been considerable criticism about this just being a case of Alberta and the Kenny government having a tantrum to score political points with no clear result being likely. Premier Jason Kenney insists that there is a plan and there is an intent. And we do have a clip of Jason Kenney in reference to what that intent is. So, Sarah, if you could just let that fly.
This is a strategy to elevate Alberta's fight for fairness in the Federation to the top of the national agenda, to get Ottawa's attention and to send a message to our friends in the rest of the country that we expect to be treated fairly. We will no longer accept governments erecting barriers, for example, to pipelines.
So talking equalization with me this morning, Dr. Bill Bewick, who is Executive Director of Fairness Alberta, which is pushing for a more fair deal with Ottawa, and clearly, I would think, very happy to have this referendum on the table. Good morning, Dr. Bewick. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
Come on. Is that fair that you're pretty glad to see this referendum going forward?
Yeah, this is something I've actually first saw 4 years ago when Ted Morton wrote a piece explaining how the same logic that the Supreme Court used to explain how Quebec could get separation on the agenda by having a referendum, just that it would really compel everybody in the country, especially the federal government, to begin serious negotiations to try to resolve the impasse. He used that logic to say we should do the same thing with equalization, and it seemed compelling to me now, then, and does now.
Yeah, the numbers tend to overwhelm after a while for a lot of people because, depending on who you're talking to, they're throwing lots of numbers, how equalization works. It's a complicated formula. But critics of your position in the Kenny government tend to say that the equalization battle is more about rhetoric than it is reality. What do you think?
I disagree. I think I've published a few columns in the National Post and Financial Post recently that show that the program really is seriously flawed in a couple, 2 or 3 major ways, and that the result of that is that there's a $21 billion series of checks being cut to 5 provinces this year, when there's really hardly any justification for more than maybe New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island getting a little bit of money. So given that the federal government's in a massive deficit hole, and given that the provinces have really come together actually over the last 5 years through the energy downturn, that there's a big wasted chunk of money that's unfairly going to only 5 provinces. And if they either stopped giving that whole chunk of money to those provinces and just put the results toward debt reduction, or if they use it for rebates to the provinces that overpaid, it could be a meaningful difference over the short and long term for Albertans.
But what's the idea behind equalization? It's to ensure that all the provinces have enough money to provide the services on a relatively equal level all across the country. So when you say it's wasted money, is that fair?
If it was serving its purpose, then no, it wouldn't be wasted. But what's happened is they put in a rule in 2009 saying that the program will grow with GDP, and at the time it was meant to stop it from getting way out of hand as Ontario became a recipient for a little while. But what's now the case is that the provinces are more equal than ever. The fiscal capacities is what they use to measure it, and they've narrowed amazingly over the last 5 years, and yet the program keeps growing with GDP still. So it's gone up 25% over the last 5 years, and it's going up another 20% over the next 4 years. And that means that, provinces like Quebec, who if you make a couple adjustments for things like the cost of living, really don't need much of a payment at all, and yet they're getting $13 billion, which is a pretty enormous sum. And then, so for Albertans who are struggling more than ever, provincial government with a bigger string of deficits than ever, to see Quebec balancing its budget while having this $13 billion check handed over is, I would say, not conducive to national unity in a different direction than in the past.
One of the arguments with that is that Alberta continues to have low taxation rates, that Quebec's taxation rates are higher, and that if Quebec had lowered its own taxation rates and still got a bunch of money, then we'd be yelling and screaming. So part of the whole equalization formula is based on how much income, how much you can raise through taxes, and then we have a busier economy. You know what I mean? It ends up getting really convoluted as to how the whole system works. But Alberta could simply raise some taxes and raise some more money on its own as well. But we choose not to. So.
That's correct, and I mean the equalization program is supposed to be fairly neutral as to what the province chooses to do, but in this case it seems to be the results that Quebec, yes, they do have higher taxes, but they are only balancing the budget because of this $13 billion in addition to the taxes they raise, and so yes, Alberta can decide to have lower taxes and try to find another way out of its deficits, but the equalization program doesn't really care, and it's probably better that it doesn't.
Trying to get equalization pulled from the Constitution. I mean, equalization in some form or another was in place before before 81, before the Constitution. So it's been part of how Canada has operated for quite a while. Rather than go with that sort of nuclear tactic of let's pull it right out of the Constitution, shouldn't we just be dealing with more of a fiscal stabilization? Because clearly Alberta's had a rough run the last 4 years or so. Why not just try to negotiate or come up with a better deal for temporary help outside of equalization?
Yeah, obviously that's another avenue to go, and Premier Kenney actually got unanimous support from all the premiers to have the federal government look at a retroactive fiscal stabilization payment to raise the ceiling, the strict cap that it has on it right now. He got every premier to agree and write this letter that helps Alberta to the federal government, which is not probably easy to do, I would imagine. But the federal government essentially ignored it. They raised it a little bit, but they didn't come anywhere close to what everybody thought Alberta deserved. So he tried that. It didn't work. I think our problem for Albertans is that it's sort of a little too easy to ignore us in Ottawa, because you're either on the party that maybe takes us for granted a little, or the party that doesn't think it has much hope here. So this is a way to show that Albertans are really upset about this and kind of take it out of the hands of politicians, because they haven't entirely come through for us.
Well, this is very political, right? The most recent framework was actually approved by the former Harper government. So, that was a conservative government in Ottawa. Jason Kenney was even part of it, and that's constantly what the opposition is throwing at Kenney as well. You were part of this issue, but now you say it needs to be fixed. But would we be having the same conversation right now politically if there was a conservative government in Ottawa?
I think so, because, as you pointed out, Canada's a big country, and if you're trying to govern the whole thing and think about how you're going to win the next election, I need to kind of oil the squeaky wheels sometimes. And so I think this is a way for Alberta to become the squeaky wheel. And what we're doing at Fairness Alberta is sharing this message in places like BC and Ontario, because they're also paying an enormous amount into equalization and getting nothing back. So that's our sort of way of trying to build support and a kind of majority coalition across the country to get significant changes to this that can make everything more fair.
Yeah. With your group, and then also with Jason Kenney, part of his platform has been, we're going to get a better deal with Ottawa. So that's been pushed pretty hard by him throughout. I mean, almost everything he says, darn Ottawa. At what point does the squeaky wheel just start to get ignored because it's been too much? There is an attitude in the rest of the country. Oh, look, Alberta's just whining again. You have to walk a line, don't we?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important that there be, additional voices that aren't just complaining and aren't just pointing out how much we pay and then we turn around. But I think there's something very legitimate to here's how much we've contributed, and then here's some of the economic policies that are preventing us from being prosperous in the future. Here's some of the programs that are shifting vast sums of money to certain parts of the country and not back to Alberta. I mean, I feel like if we don't sort of stick up for ourselves and make the country pay attention, it's not going to.
Yeah, and, people who don't want to give you what you want always like to use the word whining, right? Oh, you're just whining again, so it doesn't really matter, right?
Right, and that's why we also think it's a winning strategy to get people in Ontario to realize they're paying $2,400 per family of four every year for this, and BC to understand they're paying just as much. And so then it's not us whining, it's us pointing out how all of us is getting a bit shortchanged.
Yeah. You know what, even if this referendum passes or is approved by Albertans, it's not going to force anything, and I just wonder what kind of an impact it will truly have.
Well, I've already seen national papers kind of picking up the topic, and I expect that to gather steam over the summer. So as long as people are even talking about the issue to argue against it, just being talked about on topics like this at the national level is a victory. I mean, it's really, there's no way we get anything done unless people start talking about specific issues that matter to us. So I feel like it's already working, and I can't see this not being a positive step to really inform Canadians about some simple facts about how much we've contributed and how unfair some of what we've got in return is.
Give me your honest opinion about what you think the result of the referendum would be.
Oh, I don't know if I want to make predictions.
Come on. I double dog dare you.
Text me after the call.
That seems unfair. Yeah, you know what? And for you and for the Kenny government, you're continuing to make your arguments. You're hoping that you can keep it top of mind, because I don't know that on a daily basis an Albertan's going through and walking in the store and going, you know what? I wish equalization was changed. So trying to keep that top of mind is going to be a big part of that fight to get the result you want.
It is, but I think a lot of Albertans want a better deal out of Ottawa. So this is, I think, instead of just complaining, this is kind of a way to kind of channel all of those who want to complain into something that has a chance of at least being something positive and getting some reforms.
We'll see. I'll text you in a few moments, and then I'll share with everybody what you say. I'm not going to do that.
I know.
Thank you. Been an interesting chat. I appreciate your time this morning. Good talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. And anytime as we get ready for the referendum over the next 3 months.
Sounds good. Dr. Bill Bewick is Executive Director of Fairness Alberta, fighting for a fairer deal from Ottawa. It is 6:20 here on 6:30 CHED Mornings.
80% of heart disease can be prevented. This includes high blood pressure and cholesterol, acid reflux, diabetes,